Okay, bear with me, we're going to go a little fast with this one. Magic the Gathering can be a very complicated game, and it can be very daunting to get into. And Commander is one of, if not the most popular versions of this game. And there's already a bunch of tutorials, however, this is going to be the most condensed and the most concise. So this is everything you need to know about Commander in 2 minutes. Now, Commander is a 100-card singleton format, which means in your deck you cannot have 2 copies of the same card. And one of those cards has to be your Commander, which is a legendary creature that sets the tone or strategy for your entire deck. To start the game, you and your playgroup decides who goes first, and then you draw 7 cards. This is your maximum hand size. Now let's go through the steps of what you're going to do on your turn. First step, untap. You turn shit upright. Why does shit go sideways? We'll talk about that in a second. Upkeep. Sometimes some shit happens here, sometimes it doesn't. You will either know or be told that something happens here. Draw. You draw 1 card, and then you move to main phase 1. This is where you get to cast spells or summon creatures. You also get to play 1 land per turn. This land gives you mana. This mana is what you're going to use to cast different spells. So let's use a couple quick examples because it gets a little funky. Let's say you want to cast a Spiteful Hexmage. This requires 1 swamp that you have to turn sideways to show that it's been used, and then you get to cast that card. Or let's say you want to cast a Mayhem Devil, which requires 3 mana, one of which has to be a swamp and the other has to be a mountain. That third one can be whichever color you choose. Now let's burn through the other card types. If you want to cast spells, there's instants and sorceries. Instants can be cast at any time. Sorceries can only be cast on your main phase 1 or 2. If you want to beef up your creatures, you can use enchantment auras or artifacts, or just beef up your board state in general with artifacts. We're going to forget about battles and sieges. They are the forgotten middle child. If you want to set rules for either the game or just your general board state, you can cast enchantments. Now, everything except for instants and sorceries are considered permanents, which means they stay on the battlefield once you cast them. Now let's talk about creatures, because at the very bottom there is a little bit that signifies the creature's power and toughness, aka how hard it can hit and how hard it can be hit. If its toughness hits 0, that creature dies. Which that then takes us now to the combat phase. Now in short, combat can be broken down into 3 phases. You declare your attackers, aka what you're hitting your opponents with by turning them sideways. Your opponent then gets to decide if they want to declare blockers, aka throwing some of their creatures against your creatures, and then combat damage is resolved. This now takes us to main phase 2, which I affectionately like to call unfuck up your fuck ups. Now there is some strategy behind utilizing this phase, but we're not going to talk about that. But basically this assumes the exact same rules as main phase 1, but in this phase you kind of get to fix whatever went wrong during combat. And now you move to your end step. Some things happen here, sometimes they don't, just kind of like your upkeep. But if you have nothing to do here, you pass the turn, and then your opponents go through the same phase. You win by reducing your opponent's life from 40 down to 0. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.